Good evening, and thank you for coming this Thanksgiving week, which we appreciate your coming out. I'm Tom McNaught. I'm the Executive Director of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, and on behalf of Tom Putnam, the Director of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum, and all of our foundation and library colleagues, it is our pleasure to welcome you here tonight. It is my honor also to welcome you to the 19th Annual John F. Kennedy New Frontier Awards, and to extend our really heartfelt congratulations to both Stacey and Veronika, our recipients of this award. Welcome. We'd like to begin this program with a short film that celebrates the legacy of John F. Kennedy and helps mark the 50th anniversary of his presidency.
A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all.
The effort to improve the conditions of man is not a task for the few. It is the task of all nations.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Peace is a daily, a weekly, a monthly process, gradually changing opinions, slowly eroding old barriers, quietly building new structures.
Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or the present are certain to miss the future. Every American ought to have the right to be treated as he would wish to be treated, as one would wish his children to be treated. Do not pray for easy lives. Pray to be stronger men.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Thank you, and again, welcome this evening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging my co-chair on the New Frontier Award Committee, Trey Grayson. Trey is the director of the Institute of Politics at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and someone whose own career captures the spirit of public service that these awards are intended to recognize. He served 2 terms as Kentucky's Secretary of State and was at the time the youngest Secretary of State in the country. Trey served for 6 years on the IOP's Senior Advisory Committee and also served as an original member of the New Frontier Award Selection Committee. Unfortunate for him, fortunate for us, he would have been selected as a recipient of this award, but he was on the committee. He has contributed immeasurably to the stature of these awards. It is a real pleasure to work with him, and Trey, I'd ask you to stand and be acknowledged by the audience. A very distinguished bipartisan committee of political and community leaders selected Stacey and Veronika to receive this year's award based on their contributions to the public and their embodiment of the forward-looking idealism which President Kennedy hoped all young Americans would aspire to. Trey and I want to thank the members of the committee for their wisdom, their time, and their effort this year. We had a very strong group of nominees, and the committee did an outstanding job in selecting our 2 inspiring recipients. I would like to make a special acknowledgement of our committee member, Dan Fenn. The New Frontier Award for elective office is also called the Fenn Award in honor of Dan, who worked in President Kennedy's administration and was the first director of the Kennedy Presidential Library here on Columbia Point. Dan is with us today, and I'd like to ask him to stand up and be recognized. Dan? Okay, you don't have to stand. I also want to acknowledge and thank our incredible staff members, Ann Aaron of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation and Christian Flynn of the Institute of Politics, who have overseen this award program since it was first created in 2004. It is because of their hard work and dedication that we are here this evening to celebrate these pioneers of the President Kennedy's New Frontier. Finally, we have some very special guests with us tonight. Stacey Abrams' parents have traveled here to Boston to help us celebrate their daughter, and we're thrilled to have them with us. Carolyn and Robert Abrams, will you please stand? And Marshall and Sharon Charlotte, who are Veronika Scott's grandparents, drove all the way from Detroit to be with us tonight. I would like to ask them to stand and accept our thanks for all of the support they have given Veronika. So many of you are probably new to this award, so if you indulge me, I'll give you a little background of how this award came to be. The John F. Kennedy Library Foundation and the Institute of Politics at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government created the John F. Kennedy New Frontier Award to honor young Americans who are changing their communities and their country with their commitment to public service. These awards are presented annually to exceptional young Americans under the age of 40 whose contributions in elective office, community service, or advocacy demonstrate the impact and the value of public service and the spirit of President Kennedy. One of the New Frontier Awards honors an elected official, in this case, Stacey, whose work demonstrates the impact of elected public service as a way to address the challenges facing their community. The other New Frontier Award honors a non-elected individual, in this case, Veronika, whose contributions in the realm of community service, advocacy, or grassroots activism have elevated the debate or changed the landscape with respect to a public issue or issues. The New Frontier Award was created by two institutions charged with carrying forth the legacy of President John F. Kennedy. A month before his death, President Kennedy visited Cambridge, Massachusetts, and chose a site next to Harvard for this library. It was to be the place where the records of his presidency could be kept and where he would have his office when he retired from public life. Plans for the Kennedy Library began to take shape in December of 1963, when members of President Kennedy's family met with several of his closest associates to discuss a suitable memorial. While many suggestions were offered by people in all parts of the country, Mrs. Kennedy and other members of the Kennedy family decided that the John Fitzgerald Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum should be the only official national memorial to President Kennedy. They also agreed that the project should have three parts: a museum, an archive, and an educational institute that would carry forward President Kennedy's interest in bridging the gap between the academic world and the world of public affairs. A living memorial to President Kennedy, the Institute of Politics at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, was created to help inspire students, particularly undergraduates, to enter careers in politics and in public service. In the Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum, well, we came here to Columbia Point, and this is where the records of President Kennedy are preserved and where programs such as these are sponsored to instill in people the legacy of President Kennedy to serve the public and to give back to their community and to their country. So the relationship of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and the Institute of Politics at Harvard is kind of like fraternal twins separated at birth. But nevertheless, we share the same mission, and this is one of the programs which we advance that mission. We do so tonight by honoring tonight's recipients who embody the spirit of public service that defined the life and the career of President Kennedy. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Caroline Kennedy, the president of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation and the chair of the Senior Advisory Committee at the Institute of Politics at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Caroline is an attorney and the author and editor of 10 New York Times best-selling books on constitutional law, American history, politics, and poetry. And an inspirational leader here at the library, a great public servant in her own right. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Caroline Kennedy.
Thank you, Tom. I'm just in between needing glasses and not needing glasses. So I'm going to try it tonight with the glasses. Anyways, thank you, Tom. Your leadership of the Kennedy Library Foundation and your commitment to its ideals is a great gift to all of us who care so deeply about it. Thank you. I don't think so. Thank you also to Trey for your outstanding leadership of the Institute of Politics at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. And to the board members of both institutions who are here and the staff of both organizations who work so hard every day to keep my father's ideals alive for new generations. As we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy presidency, it's inspiring that my father's call to service is still being answered by people like the two young Americans we honor today. As a joint endeavor of the Institute of Politics and the Kennedy Library, these awards are very special to our family. I was lucky to grow up in a family that believed that we are never too old or too young to serve others. We learned from the example of the adults around us, like my Uncle Teddy or my Aunt Eunice, that the happiest people are those who work to improve the lives of others, both inside and outside of politics, and that we each have the responsibility and the power to make the world a better place. The New Frontier Awards were founded to celebrate that simple and profound idea. Some people change the world in a classroom, a garden, or a family. Others, like Stacey Abrams, enter politics and do it on a large scale. And a very few people, like Veronika Scott, create a new paradigm that helps the rest of us see things in a different way. The remarkable thing is that leaders like Stacey and Veronika usually don't think that they are doing anything exceptional. They just see something that needs to be done, and they do it. If they are facing a choice between the usual way and a better, more difficult way, they don't even see it as a choice. That's the kind of leadership that President Kennedy embodied and that these awards celebrate today. In his speech at the Democratic National Convention in 1960, my father said, "The new frontier of which I speak is not a set of promises. It is a set of challenges. It sums up not what I intend to offer the American people, but what I intend to ask of them. The new frontier is here, whether we seek it or not. Beyond that frontier are uncharted areas of science and space, unsolved problems of peace and war, unconquered pockets of ignorance and prejudice, unanswered questions of poverty and surplus. It would be easier to shrink back from that frontier, to look to the safe mediocrity of the past, to be lulled by good intentions and high rhetoric. But I believe the times demand invention, innovation, imagination, decision, and I'm asking each of you to be pioneers on that new frontier. We are still asking those same questions, tackling those same challenges, and crossing that new frontier. And we are being led today by women like Stacey Abrams and Veronika Scott. Now I'll begin the award presentations. First to Stacey, who had already had several successful careers when she was elected to the Georgia legislature in 2006. She was a prominent attorney in the public and the private sector, an author, a professor, and a successful business entrepreneur. The first woman to lead either party in Georgia, in the Georgia General Assembly, and the first African American to lead in the House of Representatives, Stacey's achievements as a lawmaker have been hard-won. She has served as a Democrat in a predominantly Republican legislature ever since she took office. But rather than accepting the limitations of being the minority party, Stacey has looked for common ground wherever she can find it. In 2011, shortly after she was elected by her fellow Democrats as their caucus leader, Stacey worked with a Republican governor to preserve what had been a crown jewel of Georgia's educational system, a full-day pre-kindergarten program available to every 4-year-old in the state. And during the same legislative session, she pushed to secure the extension of jobless benefits for unemployed Georgians. Stacey's gift is her understanding that the strongest public policy is built on relationships. As the Democratic leader in a Republican-controlled House, Stacey Abrams has built constructive working relationships with her colleagues across the aisle. And those relationships have enabled her to be a more effective advocate for her party, for the people she represents, and for the greater good. In too many quarters today, compromise is dismissed as cowardly. Stacey reminds us that there is much to be gained by listening to and working with people who hold different views. She understands that it takes courage to stand firm and also to negotiate. With compassion and wisdom, Stacey Abrams is helping to secure a brighter future for thousands of Georgians. I'm delighted to present her with the 2012 New Frontier Award. And Stacey, would you please come up to the podium? Thank you.
Thank you. thank you to Mrs. Kennedy. I told her I sound really awesome when she talks about me. So I thought about what I wanted to say, and I was actually thinking back to the conversation that I first had with Caroline Kennedy when she told me I'd been selected. And after I asked her why, we then moved on to a question that she had for me, which is why do I serve as minority leader, given how vastly we are outnumbered? And the answer to me is very simple. It's my parents' fault. I grew up in southern Mississippi. My parents are two of the most remarkable people I've ever had the privilege to know. And when we were growing up, we were what my mother referred to as the genteel poor. We had no money, but we watched PBS. That poverty could have had one of two effects on us. It could have held us down and reminded us daily of the lack that we faced. Or it did what my parents intended, and it lifted us up. Because my parents weren't content to make sure that we went to school and went to church, but we spent almost every weekend serving someone, whether it was in a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter or in a prison. Because my parents were committed to making certain that we understood that no matter how little we had, there was someone with less, and it was our obligation to serve that person. It was our obligation to not complain about what we didn't have, but to think about how others could have more. I have had no choice in the matter, and I've been on a trajectory of downward economic mobility ever since. I left a fantastic job as a lawyer where I worked with my dear friend Allegra Lawrence, and went on a downward spiral to government work, and then decided to be in elected office on my way to absolute pauperdom. But along the way, what I found is the most profound truth, and I'm honored to stand here and to stand in the shadow of President Kennedy's legacy, because the new frontier is a space that we have to all engage on a daily basis. I believe that, as Veronika has shown, and you'll hear her story next, that when we face attacks on civil justice, we have to charge forward and not fall back. That when we hear disparagement of difference, we have to call out those people and demand better and not simply nod quietly or bemoan our fate. But more than anything, when we see the injustice and the moral pauper and poverty of how we treat our fellow people, we have a deep and moral obligation to do what we can. I am honored to serve as minority leader because someone needs to. I'm honored to serve as minority leader because I've been a minority for a very long time and I'm really good at it. And I'm honored to serve as minority leader because there are 9.8 million Georgians whose voices need to be heard on every single day. And if I can be even the slightest whisper for their needs, then I've done my work here. So thank you.
This award is always the most inspiring, I think, one of the most inspiring days of the year at the Kennedy Library, and it's wonderful to have it right before Thanksgiving because we're all so blessed by your service, Stacey and Veronika, and thank you for inspiring us. Now I'm delighted to present, Veronika Scott did not set out to be a social entrepreneur. She was an industrial design major at the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, working on a class project. When she realized she could make a difference in the lives of others, her project, which asked her to design something to fill a need, has quickly become a powerful engine of hope and opportunity in the Motor City. To help homeless people survive Detroit's long, cold winters, Veronika designed a coat that would keep them warm during the day and then convert into a sleeping bag, self-heating and waterproof at night. Once she began manufacturing the coat, she realized that she hadn't merely designed a useful object. By hiring homeless and unemployed women to produce the coat, she had designed a model of social change and empowerment. She decided to call her project the Empowerment Plan. Now we would like to show you a short video so you can see just what the coat and the Empowerment Plan look like.
And here's our idea.
It's like, what can I build that would be a solution to a problem?
That was the motivation behind 23-year-old Veronika Scott's big idea, a waterproof, self-heating coat that could also serve as a sleeping bag for the homeless.
The coat came out of like, well, maybe it's something I can make that will offer a little bit of pride, that won't look like the standard I'm wearing somebody else's clothes, I'm wearing rags, I'm wearing things that don't fit me. Hopefully offer a little bit more, and also at the same time be able to ease the pain of not being able to get into a shelter at night.
Scott initially designed the coats to fulfill a classroom requirement while she was still a junior at Detroit's College for Creative Studies. Her first attempt was a heavy 20-pound coat that took 80 hours to make, and according to Scott, an epic failure.
I was like the kid with the noodle picture that came up to them like, Mom, don't you love what I made? And they're looking at me like, oh, you did such a good job. But it looks like a body bag, was their general sentiment after. And I'm like, okay, well, back to the drawing board.
Scott kept at it, and soon she found a supporter in an unlikely place, General Motors. John Bradburn manages GM's waste reduction. He heard about Scott's idea and realized that a special sound-absorbent insulating material called Sonazorb, used in door cavities and other parts of GM's Chevrolet Malibu and Buick Verano, would be perfect for her coats.
I said, well, what do you think of this material? I don't even think I introduced myself. But she looked at it and said, this is neat, this is good.
Now, GM's leftover auto scraps are helping Scott keep hundreds of homeless men and women warm this winter. Not only that, Scott has hired 8 homeless women to make the coats, a move many questioned.
Most people told me when I started this, especially when I hired, like, Alicia and I was going to hire more, they're like, you're never going to get any homeless individual to do more than just a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Scott says her critics couldn't have been more wrong. The women now make 150 coats a month and distribute them to homeless shelters and support organizations across the country.
For me, if you look at it just as like what I can do with my life by doing this, for the next, in 5 years, I'll be like 28, 29, and this could be like 100 women strong, and who knows what I could do from here.
Veronica's mentor, who is the provost of the College for Creative Studies, is with us tonight. I'd like to ask Imre Molnar to stand and be recognized for his role in helping Veronika carry out her extraordinary work. And it's just a wonderful kind of full circle story that Veronika's grandfather was an early Peace Corps volunteer. So it's a wonderful celebration for us here at the Kennedy Library. In the same way that her coat serves a dual purpose, Veronika sees a dual purpose to her entrepreneurship. While her coat is meeting an immediate need, the Empowerment Plan is breaking a cycle of poverty and homelessness that has clouded the futures of so many of our countrymen and women. Veronika has turned the idea of entrepreneurship inside out. Her goal is not to profit from her invention, but to use her invention as a mechanism for the empowerment of others. She's changing the world one coat at a time. I ask you now to join me in welcoming Veronika Scott to the stage.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here, and I have to tell you, Carolyn, when you called on my cell phone, my whole goal was try to remain calm and say as little as possible because I'm sure it would be illegible when I started speaking. But the next day, when I told all of the ladies, you had 8 women group high-fiving, screaming and crying and dancing simultaneously. So I just want you to know that and imagine, now that you've seen the ladies and seen where they've been working, that they were so very proud and all wished that they could be here today and actually sent their own quotes for, as a team if we were coming up here and accepting this together. So they've been a huge part of the process, and it's amazing to be here and think of where this really started. You actually saw a picture of my bedroom in that clip, and yes, it was consistently that messy, and yes, my grandparents have a lot of patience with me. And that was where this whole idea started at CCS. And there are 20,000 homeless in Detroit, and about 3.5 million in the US. And 20,000 is a nice estimated number. There are closer to 40. And this was not something that was apparent to me when I started at CCS. I went to CCS to do product design and to learn how to design fast, shiny, sexy cell phones and to make money. And it was amazing to me that the thing I had the most connection with and the thing that I wanted to do most of all was actually continue to go back to that same shelter and develop this product with them. And when I started, it was a realization that I was completely out of my depth. I showed up there with my grandfather at 8 o'clock at night in probably the worst area of Detroit, clutching all my design tools to my chest, and walked in and was pushed in front of a group of people like you, sitting in chairs with all their belongings in front of them, watching TV. And this man is built like a linebacker, clicks off the TV, looks over at me and says, "Good luck, you're gonna need it." And I'm standing there clutching all of my design research tools in a giant black bag like it's going to protect me from bodily harm, standing up there in front of them. And after the first 10 minutes of swearing died down, I was able to say that, I need your help with a school project. I have no idea where to start, and I'm not going to even pretend what to do, and I am currently living with my grandparents, so I know nothing. About a couple people talked to me that one day. I became known quickly as the crazy coat lady or the crazy coat girl relatively soon after. I showed up every week, 3 times a week for 5 months, just sitting there and listening. I think the biggest point that came out of all of it was there was this playground right across the street. And across that street was a playground covered in clothes and tarps and surrounded by needles. And somebody was living in that space. And I would go for a walk, and I showed up at 8 o'clock at night, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we would take a walk together around the area. And a week later, that whole play structure was burned to the ground. And what I wanted to know, as I was walking around, nobody had an answer for me as to why this happens. But when I sat there, I was like, why would you do this to yourself? Why would you risk your well-being, your livelihood, everything, and sleep 20 feet away from a shelter that's offering it to you for free? And what I realized what drives all of us, not just homeless individuals, is pride. Nobody said anything about it, but if you talk to anybody that's been homeless, whether for 2 days or for 20 years, across the board, they always say, I am needed somewhere else, I am wanted, I have a life, I am important. And that's true for anybody. This person didn't want to have to rely on the whims of others for everything. I don't think anybody can really imagine having to go and ask where to sit. People telling you when you can eat, people telling you where and when you can sleep, for every little thing. And this coat and this project came out of that one occurrence there. And I remember, starting this and bringing back this coat that I designed with them, and this woman from the same shelter, literally having to be restrained from yelling at me so hard as I was walking by, saying, "Your coats don't matter, jobs matter," and screaming at me. And it makes sense. What I was doing was creating a Band-Aid. The coat is a great thing, but it's even more important when these ladies do it, because these ladies are the cornerstone of all of this. Because like I said, when I started this, people thought that was where I'd fail. Not the fact that I was a 20-year-old with an art school degree, a student not graduating, trying to start a business. No. It was the people I was going to hire that were going to be the problem. And I have to say, to this day, I really, really, really love proving those people wrong. Because Annis, the woman that you can see in the video there, she's 54, and when she got out of prison, she had nowhere to go, and I remember she made everybody in the room during a meeting just bawl, because she said, when I got out of prison, I never expected to be homeless. I never expected to be on the street. People didn't treat me like I was human anymore. People treated me like I was worthless, and people treated me like I was trash. I couldn't even get an apartment that I had money to pay for. And she's like, I sat there and I never expected, I was going to be retired. I have a grandkid and a son and a family, and I thought after this I could live my life. And I couldn't until I started working here, and you didn't look like that I was invaluable, that I was trash anymore. And that's true. I work with an amazingly strong group of women that I only want to get bigger, because what they do and what they bring and what they have taught to me is that they have added all the value in the world to my life. All of these women have taught me immense things about what I will do in the future and what I couldn't have done without them. And, you know, I really couldn't have got to this point without their help. Those ladies that have been so very patient with me through this whole process. And Carhartt, the company that saw something in me before I even did, that helped us get all of those sewing machines. I'd like to thank Julie and Annis and Arnetta and Toya and Tanisha and Jen, all there back in Detroit watching this right now, because it wouldn't have been possible without them. So thank you very much.
Stacey and Veronika, both of you were just awesome. If you wouldn't mind bringing your awards back up on the stage and joining Caroline for what we call a photo op, and if the audience wouldn't mind giving you another ovation, we'd appreciate that as well. And while they're posing, we'd like to invite all of you here tonight for a reception that follows this forum and this award ceremony. It'll be in the new classroom. So thank you all very much for coming, and congratulations again to both Veronika and Stacey.